This is my 2007 BMW 328i, and it is part of an aging generation of BMW 3 Series. There is nothing particularly crazy about this generation of cars. However, there are certain models in this lineup that will be remembered as the end of an era for BMW. One where you could get a manual transmission with a naturally aspirated 6-cylinder even on the base models. This is before the time of turbocharged everything to accommodate for increased environmental regulations. And these cars now represent a great value for performance and features offered. Today I'm going to take you on a tour of this car, showing you all of its quirks and features, and then I'm going to get it out on the road and see how it drives. Now I'm going to start the discussion of this car by talking styling. I happen to think that all models of this car were beautifully styled. This includes the hardtop convertible, this, which is the coupe version, a sedan, and a saloon or wagon version. All of them looked great in my opinion, but the sedan in particular was very controversial, with people either loving or hating, especially the back end. The front end of this car looks fantastic, and the back end of the coupe is undisputed in its beauty. I think the styling of the coupe in particular will last for a long time, if not forever. One of my favorite features on this car is that you can roll down all of the windows and the sunroof with the click of a button. All you have to do is press the unlock button once, twice, hold, and as you will see, the windows will begin going down, and once the windows are down, the sunroof can open too if you continue to hold that button. Now, there are many things in this car that can be programmed, and one of the simple ones is that you can lock the car, hold the button, and the opposite will happen. The windows will roll up first, and once they're done, the sunroof will close itself. And this is a feature on cars offered back in 2005, something that I think modern cars should all have, and yet barely any of them actually do. In addition to the ability to open windows with the key, if you had a car with the Comfort Assist package, then you were able to keep the key in your pocket and simply place your thumb on the door handle, which would unlock the door handle first if it was in your pocket, and if you held, the windows will roll down.
With this generation of 3 Series, BMW brought adaptive headlights into the mainstream, with the premium lighting package including xenon headlights that would point in the direction that the driver was pointing the steering wheel. Also, you'll notice these classic angel eyes that add to the gorgeous and timeless looks of the front end of this car.
Now, the window and mirror controls on this car are just where you'd expect to find them, with this slider selecting which mirror to change and adjust, the window switches being here, and this allowing you to fold in the side mirrors. Now, one feature I love about this car, and I think all auto manufacturers should include, is the mirror, which points downward when putting the car in reverse. As you can see, I put it in reverse and the mirror folds down so that I can see the curb and make sure that I'm not going to scrape. And then once it's out of reverse, it comes right back up where I had it. This is something I think every new car should have in it. It's a great feature. And this is also a feature that can be turned off at any time by switching the mirror control from the left side to the right side, and it will no longer fold the mirror when in reverse.
BMW turn signals of this era were controversial, upsetting even Doug himself. They didn't stay in the direction that you originally clicked them, also causing issues with some people in canceling the turn signals. However, there were 2 levels of clicking. There was a half click that led to a 3 blink and a full click that led to non-stop blinking until canceled, or until the turn was completed. I actually prefer this type of turn signal as the button feel is great.
Now, when you look at the engine bay, you may notice that you can't see a battery there, and that's not because it's hidden, it's simply because it's not there. This is something that many German automakers did to allow for extra space inside the engine bay, and what you'll find is that the battery is actually in the trunk of this car. Now, throughout its years and its many different markets, there were many different engines offered with this generation of 3 Series, from 4 cylinders all the way up to 6-cylinder turbos, with and without diesel. Now this, as I mentioned, is the naturally aspirated 6-cylinder gasoline engine, and it was the engine to go for, with anywhere from 215 to 245 horsepower depending on the model, and 185 to 215 pound-feet of torque depending on the model. This one has 230 and 200 respectively. Now these are great numbers, and this engine was known to be relatively reliable as far as BMW engines go. However, something weird about this generation of BMWs specifically that was actually changed back is they removed the dipstick, and it was only a sensor to tell you how much oil you had in your car. BMW realized this was such a bad idea that they actually put dipsticks on their newer cars. This engine also has an electric water pump, which is great to be able to cycle coolant without turning on the car, but it is a very well-known failure point for these engines and is a pain to replace. One main thing about this car that Doug DeMuro simply would not approve of is the exhaust note. And it is beautiful, although this car is modified. Take a listen. Now, as you can see, this car is one of those that has a trunk pass-through. So you click those buttons and you can open up the cargo floor for more room for cargo that is, especially cargo that's long and you need to get all the way through the car. Now, the thing about this car is that this was optional on these cars. This was the beginning of a time where auto manufacturers offered everything they possibly could to nickel and dime you for every single option. And this is a great example of that. Now, this car was also not sold with any spare tire for any model. This car was instead sold with run flat tires, which means you could travel for a few miles on a flat tire, and although very rough to ride on, you could get to a tire shop and have it replaced. This is more expensive than a normal tire and a much harsher ride, so many owners, including the prior owner of this car, changed those run flats out to normal tires and just got a AAA membership. And you can see where a spare tire would be. You can open up the load floor here and find that you simply have extra space for storage, which I use in this car for jumper cables, CDs, and some spare bags. Now, as you can see, the owner's manual is actually kept in the trunk of this car, and you can see why with the many, many documents that are in here and the thickness of them. Now, underneath this owner's manual in the trunk, you will find a small BMW toolkit, and this includes a tow hook, a small screwdriver, a small wrench, and an Allen wrench. But even further under this is where you will find this car's battery located in the trunk, again to save space in the engine bay of this car. Now, this was one of the earlier cars with a push-to-start button system. However, only the cars with the Comfort Assist package were able to start the car entirely without the key being in the ignition. In this car, you have to put the key in the ignition first for the stop button to do anything. And as you can see, pushing it without the key in the ignition does absolutely nothing. Now, this 3 Series generation was actually the first to offer BMW's iDrive system, which included a screen in the center that could be controlled with a knob in the center console. Now, this is something that Doug would ideally get in a car of his choosing if he were to review one of these, since he likes to choose the ones that have every option available for that model's year. However, I think that that option happens to date this car significantly because it runs on some very old and clunky software that could only be controlled with that knob in the center. Common for BMWs, the screens often have pixels that have completely burned out all across, but this one is a good display that has everything still working, and I love this because it's not dating the car to any specific era, and it also is working fully as it should. Now, this radio system did have Bluetooth, so you can pick up and hang up on calls and listen to them over the speakers with a built-in microphone, but you are not able to play music through that Bluetooth system. Instead, you would have to use the included aux port for your phone. Now, the audio in this car can also be controlled with some steering wheel buttons to skip tracks and to switch out the CD, as well as a early example of a voice control system, which I never bothered to use because it simply cannot get anything right. Help.
You can say the following commands: dial number, dial name, save name, delete name, read phone book, delete phone book. Further information is available in the owner's manual. Please speak.
Dial Doug.
Function is currently not possible.
Now, the glove box in this car is cool, but nothing special, although it opens nice and slowly as a luxury car glove box should. And in fact, I could hold a whole conversation before this thing is even open. And you'll notice that inside of this glove box is a BMW flashlight. Now, this one no longer works, although it's supposed to be charged by the car as it's on, so that anytime you get stuck on the side of the road and you need some light, you've got your BMW flashlight to light the way. Now, also interesting in this car is that there are two cup holders for the front passengers. There's one for the passenger over on this side, and as you can see, you just push it and it folds out for you. And the one for the driver, you push it, it folds out, and it actually is angled in the direction of the driver. But these are parts that are not only relatively breakable with brittle BMW plastics, but if you do break one, they can cost between $200 and $300 just to get the parts from Germany. But they're cool. This car is, of course, a coupe, so I will now demonstrate getting into the back seats of this two-door car. So you begin by just pulling this flap on the front seat to get it forward, and then you can push a button to roll the seat forward, which actually rolls pretty quickly considering. And then once you have it all the way forward, just step on in. And once you're back here, you will find that you actually have a surprisingly good amount of space, even with the driver's seat in a normal position. Oh, and by the way, I am 6'5". Now, while in the back seat of this car, you will be able to have some storage. You've got a nice place to set your phone here, or anything else that you don't want sliding around in the back. You also have two climate control vents, which do have a dial to increase and decrease the airflow and the temperature, which is actually quite nice. And you even have a little tray so that anyone in the back can, of course, smoke. Then, in the center console of this, you will find that not only do you have an armrest, but you have two actually workable cup holders. Something else worth noting about the coupe models of these cars is that when you are disconnecting the keys, the seatbelt will retract, and when you insert the keys and begin to start the car, this little mechanism will at least try to bring out the seatbelt for you. Now, here in the center of the car, you have a covered ashtray with a cigarette lighter inside of it, right in front of the gear lever, and you also have some center console storage here in the middle. Now in this car, the center gauge cluster is quite well organized, and you can see here that besides the annoying BMW beeps, you can cycle through many different options, including one where you are able to check your oil level. Again, no dipstick in this car. And there are many different information screens, including a digital speedometer. You can get your range, your average speed, average fuel economy, and real-time fuel economy. Now, although these buttons look relatively simple, there's one in this car that has a lot of control, and that is this. When you press this button, it turns off your traction control, and when you press and hold it for 5 or more seconds, it will turn all traction control systems off, ABS and traction control included. So the climate controls in this car are relatively simple. You have a nice button that can turn on the maximum AC, which sets the lowest possible temperatures, recirculation, and the AC on all at once. You turn that off, and then you can simply turn on and off the climate control system by pressing these fan buttons. You can recirculate if you like, you can set where the air goes, and you can twist these buttons for individual control of the passenger and the driver airflow. And then you have down here heated seat controls, which are very intuitive, buttons right in the middle just as they should be. Now in this car, if you opted for the premium and cold weather packages both, then you would have electronic seating controls that you can see here, including some memory settings for the driver, and you will also have inflatable lumbar support that you can feel moving here to adjust how you feel on your back. And you even have what are inflatable side bolsters, so that if you're doing some hard cornering or some rough driving, you can inflate them, but if you want to be more comfortable, you can deflate them at any time. You'll also find a significant amount of additional storage here in the door, where you have an open pocket here, and this entire door panel folds out for smaller items that you would want to keep in here, such as paperwork or gift cards or anything like that. Those are the quirks and features of the 2007 BMW 328i. And with all that covered, I'm going to get this out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the 2007 BMW 328i. These cars are just a lot of fun. The automatics, you can have a lot of fun with the automatics of these cars. But if you get one of these cars with the 6-speed manual, the shifter feels great, especially if you get one with lower miles. The shifter feels great. It's nice and notchy. There's a lot of travel, but it does feel nice and notchy. And the clutch feels nice and light, kind of like the typical BMW clutch, a little bit of a toy, but nice and light, nice and easy to use. The brakes are super responsive. I mean, you barely have to move them, and the car is coming to a full stop. It's really, really good tuning on the brakes. The throttle is very responsive as soon as you get on it. You can feel it. And it's just that jerk around motion that it gives you. It's not like this car is crazy powerful, but you just downshift, you drop your foot on it, and oh man, does it feel good. And in this car, because it has my modified exhaust, it sounds good too. I love the sound of it. It's not stock, it's not the typical luxury car, but it sounds really good. So this car is just a ton of fun. The suspension, especially if you get the sport package with the sport suspension, which all the coupes have, and the sedans and wagons, they offered them as well. That suspension just feels really good. It's a good balance of nice and firm so that you hug the corners really nicely. It feels good. You can feel the shake probably in the camera. And yet at the same time, it's not too firm where it's ridiculous. And so, it's still a luxury car in the end. And yes, a mid-2000s luxury car, but still a luxury car. And they had to focus it towards that somewhat. But I mean, overall, this is just such a great car. It's a great car for the money, and no, Doug DeMuro would not himself review a car like this simply because it's not the best of the time, of the model, of the range. But I'm okay with that. I think that's a fun thing about reviewing this car when Doug would not, is it can so easily be overlooked, and it is by a lot of people. That's why I think it's such a good value, because the prices have dropped so low, and these cars hold their own. I mean, there are a lot of good attributes about these cars. And man, I mean, they are just fun to drive. Alright, getting onto the freeway here, coming from second gear. There's a car in front of me. Man, this car, it's not crazy powerful. It's not. But it feels really good to drive. It's really well balanced. And it's such good value for money. And that is my biggest argument in favor of this car. Because in the end, yes, there are better cars out there for the performance and for the luxury on both ends. And even in this middle area where this car sits. But nothing that touches the great value of this. I mean, I picked up this car when it had, 2 years ago, when it had 120,000 miles, which is a lot. I picked up this car for $5,000, and you can easily find the best, nicest versions of these cars for $10,000. It's fantastic. And the cars that are most sought after of these are the ones that Doug would actually keep his eye on. The saloon wagon versions with the more powerful turbocharged 6 cylinders that have all-wheel drive and the manual transmission. But that combination of options was probably bought like twice in the entire United States in the entire model run. And so you're barely ever going to find those, and they're going to cost upwards of $20,000 on Auto Trader. And you'll probably have to drive out to Florida or across the country somewhere to get it or ship it. So I think this car sits in a really, really nice place for the practicality, for the luxury, for the fun, for the performance. And I think it just has a lot going for it in all those regards, especially considering, again, the price.
And the Doug score is here. Not beating out any of the competition, it comes quite close to some cars from the era, as well as a similar car from the modern era, the GR86 and the BRZ. Find one of these with a 6-speed manual transmission, and you're guaranteed to have a lot of fun for a decent price in one of BMW's last inline-6 naturally aspirated engines.